Yo, welcome back to another episode of the Money Matters podcast. This is a Mailbag Monday, actually recorded on Mondays. I'm coming to you live, not from the closet in Chicago. I'm in Oslo, Norway, here about to attend the Oslo Freedom Forum, coming off the back of President Bukele's inauguration in El Salvador. So we have no dad, we have no Mr. Bill. We have no Brookie Cookie, my stepmother. It's just Dylan and I, who's also here in Oslo with me. Dylan, how are you?
26 hours later, 26 hours later, I'm doing fantastic.
That's true. Bitcoin price isn't high enough for us to own a plane yet. So the San Salvador to Oslo was a bit of a mission, but no mission can stop us from fighting for Bitcoin. So here we are. It was a 26-hour trip. But with that, I think we talk about El Salvador. First, as you guys know, we appreciate this. We have so much fun with this. With all the, I do a lot of media, and this is the most fun one, just hanging out and shooting the shit with you guys. So thank you for the comments and the questions. Hopefully we get to answer some later in a bit, Dylan. And if you guys want to support us, use Strike. We're about to launch in the UK. We're live in Europe. We're live in America. We sell Bitcoin. That's our most popular product. We're really good at that, but we're really good at all things Bitcoin. So if you want to support us, just use our product and support our company. But if not, we also don't really give a fuck either. We're here to hang. And with that, El Salvador, right? We just attended. These are two guys that grew up together in a tiny little city outside of Chicago that just went to a president's inauguration. How cool is that? I don't even know where to start, Dill.
Yeah, I think we start maybe 72 hours ago, and it's been what, 2.5 years since we were last in El Salvador. It's been a while, as the popular song goes, and I have my own unique takeaways for what's changed, at least from my perception in the past 2.5 years. But I'd love to get your thoughts. What do you think was different this time around visiting El Salvador versus 2.5 years ago?
The airport. No, I mean, everything was different. But my favorite story that I've told now a dozen times is the airport. We got off the plane and we probably spent a half hour just wandering around the airport. We were in awe. I couldn't believe it. It was nicer than O'Hare, we're from Chicago. That's our airport in Chicago, but that's also America's airport because Chicago's in the middle of America. So it's the destination for all your transfer flights and your layovers. I think it's the most popular and most used airport in the United States. And I got off the plane and I looked around. Everything was brand new. It was beautiful. It was nice. The bathrooms were clean. There was no homeless people sleeping on the floor like there are in Chicago. It was gorgeous. And I couldn't believe it. I hope the reason I like to tell that story is I hope it puts into perspective when people are like, why isn't El Salvador the most powerful country overnight? It's like, do you know how long it takes to build an airport from scratch? Like when you're standing in the thing, it's like the size of a football stadium. It's like even the Dallas Cowboys can't build that overnight. So it put it into perspective. It's like, this is a multi-year project, and it's beautiful and it's state of the art. So that was a foreshadowing of our entire experience, I think. I've said that it always felt like when I met with the government for the first time, Bitcoin was a piece of their vision. It's not the vision. As much of Bitcoiners as they are, and they deserve all the credit and respect for that, they aren't a Bitcoin startup, or they aren't a Bitcoin, they're not Sailor. They're a sovereign nation. And the vision was always felt like the Latin American Singapore, which to me meant very tough on crime, very clean, hard money. So to them, that's Bitcoin. And then there's this kind of hodgepodge of aesthetics, talent, technology. Like they got volcanoes, they have beaches, they have waves. They have a coastline, they're connected to the ocean. So that's the aesthetics piece. They're attracting talent and the innovation. So forward thinking on tech. So Bukele's not only interested in Bitcoin, but artificial intelligence, he's investing a lot in. So it feels like the beginnings of Singapore for Latin America. And I was impressed. Once you actually get there, it's hard for me to listen to any critics that have never gone, because once you get there and you're like, I guess rebuilding a country does take more than a year or two. And they're pretty far along for the time they've had since I met them. So I don't know. It was that everything's changed in the best way.
Are you familiar with the infamous San Francisco bathroom project by any chance?
No, I could take a guess though that people ruin their bathrooms and there's probably like piss and shit and drugs and all sorts of foul things in the bathroom. Is that how close am I?
You're pretty close, but referring to, it's an infrastructure project, and you just got to take a look at this. The project, announced in 2022, was estimated to cost $1.7 million and take 3 years to complete. The project of itself is a construction of a single public toilet. And so for me, just doubling back or maybe piggybacking off your point about criticism of the country, I mean, what Bukele and El Salvador has been able to accomplish in 4 years is historic. And one of the people that we were there with, individual named Zuby, I thought put it extremely well. It's a country on the up. It is improving every day, every second. And obviously with this additional term, I have no doubt that things will continue to trend in that direction. But it's an interesting and sort of stark contrast to the United States in some ways for me. And then obviously the biggest takeaway is, again, just how much that country's improved in the 2.5 years since we've been there. And to your point, the airport is sort of the initial introduction to that. I've paid immigration fees now 3 times there. This was the first time that they accepted Bitcoin to do so. Right. And so for anyone who is, Bitcoin's a sham or Bitcoin doesn't work down there, try entering the country. I promise you that it does. And so, there's a lot to say about the time that we spent, and I'm super excited to get into that as well. There are some things that you did that I didn't do. And, the net takeaway for me is El Salvador as a country that's full of hope. It's on the up and up. And there are a lot of Western civilizations, a lot of first world countries that simply can't say the same. They would be lying if they did.
Yeah, the up and up is an important point, though, because you can feel it in the energy in the people. It's the equivalent of, the Golden State Warriors in the NBA. So for those that are not U.S. listeners, the National Basketball Association in America, the Golden State Warriors have been one of the most dominant franchises in the last decade. But now I wouldn't describe them as on the up and up, right? And I don't think the culture inside of the Warriors is any fun. They may not re-sign Klay Thompson. They may got to get rid of Draymond Green. They don't know if they're ever going to win a championship again, at least with Steph Curry. So as cool and as awesome and as powerful as they've been, I wouldn't describe them as on the up and up. And there's an argument that that's how the United States feels, versus El Salvador is a franchise that's getting draft picks, momentum. People want to come and show up courtside and experience it. They just want to be there, want to be a part of it. And everybody in the arena and the whole fan base is just fucking fired up. That's the best analogy, if I were to try and explain it to my high school buddies, is like, don't get me wrong, the U.S. is great, and so is Golden State. But are they going to win a championship anytime soon? Who's on the roster next year? Is Steph done? That's kind of how it feels. Versus El Salvador is like, we went and it's like, oh, Malay, the president of Argentina, is coming. Oh, the Trumps are coming. Oh, Tucker Carlson will be there. It's like, oh, no shit. This is the coolest place to be in town. And you've got like a generational leader in many respects. I mean, listen, I've said 100 times to the public, my expertise is in Bitcoin. I don't know much else about. I wouldn't know how to build, clean streets. I can barely clean my room. But as far as Bitcoin and what I've seen from Bukele, it's a generational talent. So that's just how it feels. The up and up is super real, and it's a vibrant culture. People feel like they got some hope. And they don't feel that. They've said as much to me. Everyone's got their dream job. No one's made more money in their whole life. Everyone's got a salary that they can't believe. Everyone's got a job and a career that they can't believe. It's pretty cool. So the up and up is legit.
I think an interesting point on the criticism, and look, I'm same boat as Jack. I'm not a politics guy. I've read about and I'm aware of the criticism that exists from people outside of El Salvador. But my God, every single person that I interacted with, hotel staff, cab drivers, citizens on the street, you ask them about Bitcoin, and they're, rightfully so, there's mixed opinions. Some people are like, I don't really know much about it, but I heard it's cool. Or some people are like, I love it. It changed my life. I did not find a single person with an iota of a criticism about Bukele that was a resident of or lived inside of El Salvador. I didn't find one. And I think that's really telling of, just how adored that guy is in his own country, and whatever means he used to achieve, what he wanted to accomplish. I'm not a politics guy. I don't have an opinion on it. I think far more important would be what the citizens of the actual country's opinions are, who reside in and live inside of that country. But that guy seems to be one of the more beloved people I've ever met, which again, in stark contrast to we just threw a former president in prison, right? Or convicted him of felonies, and the other guy's basically dead. So again, just the up and up is intoxicating in that country.
Speaking of, I guess I'll parlay that. So I went to his inauguration, and he seated us well too. I was almost in the front row. It was awesome. So shout out to all the other Bitcoiners that were there. Shout out to Max and Stacy, took care of me, and it was really cool. His speech was, to paraphrase his speech, he drew an analogy to a really sick, cancer patient almost, in that you keep trying to seek medical attention. If you're not healthy, you're not feeling well, and something's wrong, and you keep trying to seek medical attention, and the medical is giving you pills and medicine and all sorts of things that they're selling will fix you. But they're really just have a self-interest in selling you prescription pills or medicine or whatever, and you're not getting any better. And all you're doing is serving their best interest by being sick. And so that was his kind of paraphrased speech in a weird way, which then he said, when we started listening to ourselves and we started believing in ourselves, we were able to rid ourselves of our diseases. And it's because we didn't listen. We didn't take the prescription pills. Now I'm paraphrasing for him, so you guys will have to listen to it too for yourself. It's on the internet. But he's like, as soon as we didn't just start swallowing all the pills and doing all the things that everyone else wants us to do because we got to, pay for their surgery bills and medical bills, all that stuff. We're not a patient of anyone else. We're our own sovereign nation. And when we believed in ourselves and we started looking inwards, that's when we started fixing problems. And here's all the problems we fixed. And this is my first term. I was kicking ass. And then he said, the next one, I'm focused on the economy, which I thought was pretty interesting. Obviously, tourism, there's a lot that's gone well. If you want to buy beachfront property in El Salvador, those are U.S. prices. So the economy is already booming relative to when he started. But he that was his focus. So it was a pretty cool analogy to a sick patient where the medical staff was interested in selling stuff than fixing stuff. And he said, we started fixing stuff when we started doing it ourselves. I don't know. It was cool. And that was his point. And he made a pretty clear point that he was going to focus on economic growth. He didn't really mention in what respect or what strategy. So that was kind of interesting. But he was like, we're going to focus on the economy. We're going to make it boom. So we'll see.
For someone who wasn't there, what was the energy like for both the inauguration? So on Saturday there was an inauguration, and there was kind of this after party celebration type event that we both went to. But for someone who wasn't at the inauguration, what was the energy like there?
It was vibrant. I mean, like you said, I think he's the most popular politician in the world. Well, no, not literally. You know what I'm trying to say. Within his country. What's the correct scientific way to say what I'm trying to say.
I think he has the highest approval rating of any
Approval
nation
rating.
leader on planet Earth.
There you go. Sorry, that's how you guys know I'm not a politics guy. I didn't even know how to say that. He got the highest approval rating of anyone. So it was vibrant. I mean, everyone loves the guy. So it was like we were at a football match. So in the U.S., I can only watch the real popular European soccer games on TV. But it felt like that. Like they were blowing the horns. You know the horns that they blow in FIFA World Cups? They were blowing the horns and waving the flags and chanting, Bukele, Bukele, Bukele. It was so cool. And all of the presidents that were representing their own nations that were there. So as president of all the Central American countries, President of Argentina Milei was there. And there was a ceremony of them. They would get dropped off by their security vehicle, and they would walk the red carpet that was in between the army and the National Guard. And it was awesome. It was pretty cool. There's flyover jets flying over our heads that would, spray the white and blue national colors over our heads. So it was awesome. And he gave a great speech. I also thought it was really cool. I mean, he's so young. That's the other thing. As an American, so he's up there in front of us, and his wife is up there, just healthy, beautiful, brilliant Salvadoran lady, and his two kids. His kids, one of them is barely old enough to speak, and the other doesn't know a word, doesn't know how to walk because it looks like 6 months old. I mean, I should have probably Googled this before we started recording, but the point is, young family, vibrant, energetic, and his oldest daughter gets up there and grabs the microphone and says a few words to the crowd, and it was like the cutest thing ever. Versus, obviously someone like Biden, right? And we all know his son's old enough to be smoking crack. So it was just weird. It was weird to see such a young guy up there with his beautiful daughters, and he talked really well about his wife. He spent a lot of time talking about how you can't do it. He's very religious, so he talked a lot about how you can't do any of this without God, and you can't do any of this without a beautiful woman by your side. And so that was also interesting. But I felt like I was at a sporting event half the time, in the coolest way. I mean, people were going fucking nuts. So anyway, it was cool.
A young, charismatic president with strong family values seems like a far cry for us for the next 4 years, for sure.
It was just interesting. I mean, listen, like I said, if you want me to criticize El Salvador, I can, right? Of course I can. And you want me to compliment America, I can. So not to lay my life on the line of, smashing the US in the mouth, but it was like a local celebrity that everyone wanted to just sit courtside and watch him, go for 40. That's another basketball analogy, but it felt like, Tucker was there. We were there. We just want to sit courtside, watch the guy ball out. And he was young and energetic, and the people were going nuts. And that's just not the energy in America. It's just very different. So anyway.
I thought a really cool event that we did that might have gone a little bit under the radar was you taught a class at the Kubo Plus School, which is a school down in El Salvador that's teaching a business class to Salvadorans who are excited and interested in learning more about Bitcoin. I think in the past, maybe 3 or 4 years, might have been the smallest audience you've presented to in a long time. But it offered a very intimate sort of environment to teach people about Bitcoin who are super eager to learn about it. And obviously your history and your lore in El Salvador is well known to the people there. What was that event like from your perspective? Because I was in the crowd.
It was great. It was awesome. I mean, I love talking about Bitcoin and teaching Bitcoin. Everyone listening to this probably knows that. But it was cool because, again, they're just so excited and hopeful. I hope I know some of our buddies from high school listen to this, and sometimes getting them into Bitcoin's a drag, like, guys, I know more about Bitcoin than maybe anyone else in the world. You want to buy some, you want to learn something, you want a job? They're like, no, fuck off. And in El Salvador, they're like so excited. They're just so thankful to be getting an opportunity and a chance for one of the most important technologies of our lifetime. And that was, I don't know, the energy was just amazing. I mean, I'm obviously always so, I get so fired up and excited when I get to talk about Bitcoin, and they were excited right back. So it's a combination of, I really appreciated how thankful they were. I mean, they were as nice to me as anyone's ever been. So phenomenal hosts. They're super appreciative, and I really, really respected and appreciated that. And then the class went really well, and they're smart. I mean, at the end of the day, the coolest thing about Bitcoin is everyone's got access to it. Everyone can understand it. Everyone can benefit from it. So talk about leveling the playing field. That's a lot of the perceived benefit. And so as long as you got an equal chance as everyone else and you're human, you know, you can achieve anything you put your mind to. And so they're just as smart as a Stanford grad student. And so they got it right away. Brilliant. They all were building their own projects. So I spent some time afterwards and took a look at what everyone was working on. And there was really cool ATMs and on and off ramps and wallets and exchanges. And someone built NFC product with a card. So it was just, I don't know. It was great. It was awesome. I really enjoyed it. And shout out to Cuba Plus for inviting me and giving us the opportunity to do that. It was super special, great hosts, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I thought the entrepreneurial spirit down there was awesome. There was like a portable ATM demo. There was like a coffee shop or a coffee roaster that was like running on a Bitcoin standard, which was unbelievable to see. When we went down to El Zante, what was there, like a cold storage store where you could buy like Jade wallets and cold cards and stuff. And so seeing the entrepreneurial spirit and things being built around Bitcoin down there was also super cool to see. Because again, 2.5 years ago, there was literally none of that.
Yeah, and again, it's just it's a different, how do I want to say this? It's a different appreciation and approach to the tech and the opportunity than Americans have, or just like where I'm from. And it's not necessarily anyone's fault. Like, it's not my peers' fault per se, but I mean, El Salvador had a civil war that really decimated the place. They lost their own currency, a lot of violence. They're the most violent place in the world at one point, I believe. And so this is all just a blessing, and it's probably like the coolest time of all time to be a Salvadoran right now. And so it's just different energy, and they're just so happy to be there, and they were happy that we were there. So it's just different. It's just very different.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Sitting down here in Norway, what are we up to down in Norway?
Well, we're at the Oslo Freedom Forum, so we got a hell of a schedule. We got the Salvador President Bukele inauguration in San Salvador. Then we just landed in Oslo, I don't know, 2-3 hours ago, and then I go to Prague after that for BTC Prague and spend some time with the biggest event in Europe, Bitcoin event in Europe. So we're fired up. I'm pumped. The Oslo Freedom Forum, this is my 3rd year in a row, I believe. I mean, I've been a big donor to HRF. Strike's been a donor to HRF. I love what they do. I love Gladstein. I may be the biggest Alex Gladstein fan in the world, and everyone's an Alex Gladstein fan. So hopefully that goes to show how much I think he's a genius and how he's been able to thread a fine line between activism and human rights and Bitcoin and this technology. It's hard for me to believe what other human could have married those worlds and produced the offspring that is these type of events and all of the workshops and the relationships. He's really pushed this space forward in ways that before Alex, I didn't really know these type of synergies and this type of progress could be made. So I'm happy to always support him and support all the activists here. So I'm pumped. I think the last thing about the Oslo Freedom Forum, and I would encourage everyone that has an opportunity to come. I would say this conference, I learn at every conference. And I'm a sponge with that stuff. I love it, right? I mean, Bitcoin's one of those fields where you're never going to be an expert no matter how hard you try. And every single day you're going to learn something that you didn't even know you could. So I'm always learning, especially at these conferences. I would say Oslo, though, is where I learn the most, because it's not a Bitcoin conference. The Bitcoiners are invited to learn about how the world works in ways that especially me from the West, I'm not privy to. So what it's like to live under an authoritarian, to escape, and to be an activist and fight for freedom. And that doesn't mean buying Bitcoin and stacking sats. Fighting for freedom means, living unbanked, with no phone, with no home, with no access or communication with your family. And so the lessons learned here for me have been life-changing and humbling, and gives me a different perspective on my life and the rest of the world every single time. So I'm looking forward to learning, to be honest. That's easily the most humbling event every year I go to, by far, and puts the whole Bitcoin thing into perspective, and I think in an important way.
Yeah, dude, I couldn't agree more. I was going to say that sometimes, working on Strike, working on Bitcoin, sitting at a laptop in Chicago for weeks or months on end, it's pretty easy to lose sight of how important Bitcoin is outside of the Western world. I mean, the Chicago talk and most of the talk in the US is heavily dominated by, number go up, what's the price, what's happening, who's affecting it, why is it going up, right, left, down. And I always come back from the Oslo Freedom Forum with an absolute fire in my fingertips when I open my laptop and I need to get back to work. It's incredibly inspiring. And the fact that, Bitcoin is talked about as freedom money is one thing, but experiencing it actually provide freedom in a monetary perspective to people who are otherwise, obfuscated or completely cut off from that system in whatever resident country they're from or reside in. It's just incredibly impactful. It's incredibly inspiring and makes me extremely proud to be a Bitcoiner.
Yeah. Can I also make the point? I think in Bitcoin, there's often this, it's not grifting, but it's like, how are we going to get all 8 billion people to have a node on their phone? Or how are we going to get all 8 billion people to be able to own a UTXO? And then there's the other camp that's like, that's pointless. We need to optimize for ossification or whatever. My point is, there are such extreme ends that aren't actually talking to anybody. And so when you come to Oslo, you're actually learning like what people that are oppressed by an authoritarian actually need. Because oftentimes it's not like 8 billion people running a node on the phone, or oftentimes it's not things that you hear about on the internet or you read about on the mailing list. And I'm not pointing fingers, because, if you're in the West and you live with extreme privilege, how are you supposed to know? It's very difficult to have a perfect understanding of planet Earth and all 8 billion people's needs. But I find it fascinating is you hear real world use cases of people that do use Bitcoin for things that aren't number go up, or aren't DCAing, or aren't whatever, borrowing dollars and smashing Bitcoin purchases. And there's a lot of nuance involved in what they need. So as far as making Bitcoin useful for other people, I always find that fascinating, because sometimes the debate on the internet when it comes to Bitcoiners, what it feels or is represented as isn't necessarily true. Hopefully we do get to the point where all 8 billion people on the planet do want to run a node, but that's not where we are. And so then that begs the question, well, where are we? And if you want to learn some of the niche use cases that are really important to things like freedom and censorship resistance and decentralization, this conference gives you like actual humans with actual desires and needs and feedback, which are more tangible to actually achieve than you would think. You know, people are like, well, you know, we're never going to scale Bitcoin to 80 billion people, so we might as well never touch it at all. You know, and I also, you know, I'm very much in the camp of move as slow as possible. I'm not advocating for change, but hopefully that resonates with the Bitcoiners listening. Is it's one of the rare events where you're talking to folks with really unique use cases that are as important as anything else. These people need literally censorship resistant money, or else a lot of them, you know, will die. So that's cool. It's a privilege to be here
It
and
seems like there's a
listen.
lot of it seems like there's a lot of noise right now between the camps of store of value versus medium of exchange. I can't tell if this has kind of always been this hot debate button issue, but it seems like right now it's taking front and center. It seems like you have, you know, people like Saylor championing store of value, don't change it. It's perfect as it is. And you have people who are like the current system right now won't suffice for it being the medium of exchange for planet Earth. Or
Yeah. Well, as much as things change, things stay the same. How's that go? Some shit like that. I was close enough, right? So no, this is always how it's been, right? Roger Ver wanted medium of exchange. So then that was what the block size wars was. This is, I think, the nature of a distributed network with no ruler. There are rules with no ruler. And so people are always going to fight over the direction. I think it goes to show that Bitcoin's working. If we weren't fighting and there was a unified direction consistently all the time, that would imply we have some Vitalik, right? Or we have some type of leader or ruler or founder. So I think people got to chill the fuck out. I think the fact that we do, seriously, I mean, the fact that there's fighting, that's how you collaborate. That's how you argue and pitch and advocate for the future of the protocol. And you have to do that because it's not yours. So you have to be loud. You have to disagree. You have to fund things. So I think it's good. The fact that we're arguing. The other thing is when, you know, people are, oh, Bitcoiners are so mean to each other. It's like, grow up. This is like the utmost version of being a mature adult that's here to do serious shit. We're talking about changing the world with money. So I'm allowed to argue with someone and disagree with someone and then still love and care for that person and still be on the same team as them. Because I'm an adult and I'm here to do hard work. I'm here to go through whatever it takes to make the world a better place. So I think people got to chill on that front. It's always been this way. If you're new to Bitcoin and you're really worried that Saylor and Matt Odell are fighting, trust me, that's how it's always been. They still are friends, and it's no sweat off anyone's back. That's how it goes. It's rules with no rulers. So it'll always be that way. More specifically, I am on the camp of you got to go as slow as possible. We have everything to lose. It doesn't matter how much we have to gain. We'll always have more to lose. Does that make sense? So if you're ever evaluating, like, do we have more to gain or lose? We will always have more to lose because we have one shot at this thing. So how do you approach something where you always, no matter what, have more to lose? I don't know, probably cautiously, right? Probably carefully, probably cautiously, probably with a lot of rigor and a lot of testing and a lot of research. Also, by the way, how do you approach something where you have nothing but time on your side? What does that mean? That means this technology is going to outlive all of us and my kids and my kids' kids and my kids' kids' kids. So it's got nothing but time and everything to lose all the time. So you just got to be careful. You got to be slow. It's one of those humble things about Bitcoin where Bitcoin doesn't operate on our time. We operate on Bitcoin's time. When's the next halving, Dylan? Is it on a Sunday at noon in 4 years, or is it at a specific block?
it's a specific block. I have no idea what day it is.
Right. So what am I saying? I'm saying we are on Bitcoin's time. Bitcoin's not on our time. Bitcoin doesn't even know how we keep time. So Bitcoin's going to go at the pace it needs to go at. And it's a humbling experience for you to be like, it's not about my business. It's not about me. It's not about my interests. I'm on Bitcoin's schedule. And you either get with it or get lost. At the same time, I do not agree or think it's useful to tell people what to build on Bitcoin or what to fund or what open source engineers should be doing. Let me tell you why, because it's very simple. It's an open source project, so anyone can do whatever they want. No matter how much we convince people that they shouldn't be doing something or they shouldn't be funding something or they shouldn't be focused on something or shitcoin shouldn't come on Bitcoin, the reality is if someone wants to do it, they will. And so it's wasted energy and effort to try and convince the world of anything. What you need to do is educate the world, in my opinion, because the only way Bitcoin can change is if the people that run the nodes update their software. Does that make sense? So Dylan, if you were to write a change that says there's not going to be 21 million Bitcoin, there's going to be 21 billion, and that's a very inflationary change to Bitcoin, the price would crash overnight to like, I don't know, zero. That actually, you can do that, Dylan. You can go right now on the internet, make that change. It'd be a few lines of code and you could submit it, but it actually wouldn't change Bitcoin because all of us that run the network. So I run a Bitcoin node, my neighbor runs a Bitcoin node, the guy in Africa runs a Bitcoin node, because we wouldn't update and run your software. And so the point is, if Putin wanted to attack Bitcoin, if you wanted to attack Bitcoin, if shitcoiners want to attack Bitcoin, if Wall Street wants to attack Bitcoin, they can change Bitcoin, quote unquote, and go change the code whenever they want. They can only literally update the network if we all run the code. So that's what it means to have the power with the people. That's what it means to have a censorship-resistant network, is in order to update Bitcoin, you got to go in everyone's home that's a part of the network and update their computer, which is impossible, which is why it works. And so I just find it kind of useless to sit and argue and debate over like what should get funded and who should be funding what and who should be working on what. It's like people should work on what they want to work on. And if it's valuable, everyone that runs Bitcoin and has a vested interest in its success will run that software and Bitcoin will upgrade. And if it stinks and we don't like it, then we won't use it. And someone will have written Bitcoin code for nothing. And it doesn't matter and it's moot. And so if you don't want to fund something, guess what? Don't cut the check and fund it. If someone else wants to fund something, let them. And if you don't like it, just don't run the software, right? So I do think we should go slow. I do think all of those things, but I just want to make sure everyone knows how Bitcoin works. Like, it doesn't work that, whatever we tell the developers to do is the future. It's whatever we run on our nodes is the future. So, Vitalik and Putin can write an update to Bitcoin all they want. It's not going to update my node. You'd have to walk into my closet to update my node. That's the only way to update my Bitcoins. So that's all of my ranting on the topic. In summary, listen, it's how it goes. Adults argue because they're passionate, because this project matters, and it doesn't mean they don't love each other. When you're a kid, your parents argue sometimes, and they still love each other. It's okay. Don't be a little spoiled brat. Number two, Bitcoin has everything to lose and it's got nothing but time. So it has to go slow. We're on Bitcoin's time. Bitcoin's not on our time. Number three, the only way to update Bitcoin is if we, the network, update Bitcoin. So let people fund what they want to fund. Let people do what they want to do. I just don't know if everyone understands how it works, which that also happens. Every single cycle, you get new entrants, right? Like not everyone was around for the block size wars. Not everyone was around when Silk Road failed. Or excuse me, I wasn't. I was still getting into it. My dad was, right? I was there. I was just asking him the same questions people are asking me now. I was asking my dad in 2013. And so you got new people that maybe don't know how this works. Maybe you're listening to their favorite person on Twitter. And so I just want to make sure everyone knows how it works too, because a lot of the energy and time that's being wasted on these arguments implies that people don't know how Bitcoin works, which, I'm not trying to make fun of anyone. It's just a waste of time. I don't know why we would spend time. It's useless.
Yeah, I mean, again, if this was anything other than an authentic podcast, maybe I'd take the other side of you for entertainment's sake, but I agree with every single point you made. Should we get into some Q&A?
Yes. I didn't even actually create a list this time. I should have on our flight. Do you have any? If not, I'll pull up the comments right now.
Yeah, no, let's do it. I like this question from Crypto Potter. We talk about this often, so I'm curious to get your opinion live and on the air. But what, in your opinion, would be another 0-1 event as massive as El Salvador making Bitcoin legal tender?
I think if the United States buys Bitcoin, that'd be huge. And I don't know if we're that far off. Knowing Trump, it's not crazy anymore to think if he gets a little momentum and we support him and he's leading the polls and it's pretty obvious that Bitcoiners could be the difference in this election. I don't think it's past him to say, you know what, this thing is clearly good for America. I'm going to buy some and add it to our treasury. I think that'd be a huge moment. I mean, listen, the thing about El Salvador is they didn't have their own currency. And so they lost their currency in their civil war. When I went there, they were using the dollar. Still are, still very much are. But it's definitely different if you were to adopt Bitcoin with having your own central bank and currency. And so the first government that's able to print money and buy Bitcoin, that would be the transition to like a Bitcoin standard. That would be like when central banks start buying Bitcoin, right? That's what they do with gold. The assumption is that as the deficits get worse and worse and worse, central banks are going to reprice their currencies against gold because they all own gold and have gold. So what ideally someday you'd have to assume they're going to reprice their currencies against Bitcoin. That's how Bitcoin fixes the world, right? And solves for all the deficits and the debts and stuff. So if the US and Trump come out and say, you know, we're going to buy some, which he's not going to say I'm going to print money to buy some, but in reality, that's the truth, right? I think that would be a pretty big one. And if it's not the US, some nation with their own central bank that does that would be very different than El Salvador in that material way. Is that El Salvador is not printing Salvadoran shitcoin to buy Bitcoin. They're buying Bitcoin with real hard cash, just like Sailor is, right? So I think that would be one comes to mind.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if it's like a scorching hot take, but I think from a macro econ perspective, it's far more interesting to me that that El Salvador holds Bitcoin in their treasury. They're the first sovereign nation on planet Earth to do so. But this is this sort of first domino to fall in what I think will be a game theory sort of, Cold War style arms race to acquire Bitcoin to maintain relevance and influence and power as a nation state.
Yes,
I mean, I think the game theory goes that way.
Yeah, I think it's by the end of 2027 at this point or something like that. China will have more gold than treasuries, than US treasuries. So it's the same type of game theory that nation states play with gold. Is everyone's like, well, if this global debt to GDP and these deficits are a problem and the bond and treasury market is now the newest shitcoin, where's everyone going to try and run in case the cards fall and they have to reprice currencies? It looks like gold, right? And then the question is, the coolest part is that, Bitcoin's superior to gold. And someone like Naib knows that. He knows that. And he benefits from being first. He knows US can't be first. And so he's taking advantage of the game theory and plugging into the network. And so there's real game theory there. So as soon as that gets a little bit more momentum, you have to do it. Because if the world does reprice currencies against Bitcoin and you don't have any, then you're screwed. So yeah, like let's say if China came out and said, we bought a ton of Bitcoin, you'd bet your bottom dollar the US would immediately. They couldn't afford not to. There's too much risk. So yeah, I don't think, now just to be clear, I don't think China's, or I don't have any insider information. I don't know, maybe the Middle East, maybe there's some sovereigns out there that think of Bitcoin like oil, like more like a commodity, but something like that would be, I think, the next step. People are always like, why hasn't there been another El Salvador? There's a lot of reasons. There's a ton of reasons why. Like Argentina, like Milei is not in a position necessarily to make like immediate change himself. Just by the way the country is set up, there's a lot of reasons why. And so El Salvador was a special case, and all credit where credit's due. They were first, and they appreciated the uniqueness of the situation, and they won. So I don't know. I think something like that would be the next chapter, and very similar game theory to the gold stuff we see right now.
One last question here from Bitcoin Snacks. Bitcoin Snacks asks, Jack mentioned a while back that he attended a coding course and went on to develop Zap and then Strike. What would he recommend as first steps to someone wanting to learn to code and contribute to Bitcoin?
My favorite part about my coding career is everywhere I learned to code doesn't exist anymore. Swear to God. I went to all these different boot camps and stuff, and they're all gone. So, but seriously, when people are like, where'd you go? I was like, well, I went to this thing called Starter School and then Starter League and then Talent Buddy and all this stuff. You can Google it. They all shut down. But I would say, listen, I wasn't computer science or anything like that. When it comes to engineering, it's all about being able to know what you don't know. What do I mean by that? If you can have enough of an understanding of what you don't understand, where you can Google it, research it, enroll in a program, then the world is yours. Like, there's a very familiar state for all engineers is that once you understand the error log, or once you understand why your code isn't compiling and you're able to Google it, then you can learn anything. So, and even now, I mean, if I was learning to be an engineer with ChatGPT, I bet I would have been twice as efficient. So it's the art of being able to know what you don't know, which is difficult, right? Like, so for example, what's a language I can't speak, like German or something? I don't even know what I don't know. I wouldn't even be able to like hear German and be like, oh, what was that part? It all sounds, like gibberish to me. So any introductory coding class, you got to be passionate. Nothing works in life and if you don't care. So you got to be passionate. You got to really want to do it, and just take an introductory class. Scratch your own itch. Be a user of your own software. Build something you care about, and then you'll get to a point where you're familiar enough to be able to Google stuff and know what you don't know. And from there, as many hours in the day, you can just get better. That was my story, at least. Like I built chess software. I built, like I didn't start working on Bitcoin stuff for years after I started coding. I was building, really entry level stuff, but I was a customer of my own shit. So I was able to stay up all night, first thing in the morning. And eventually I was good enough to where I was able to understand what I didn't have quite yet. And then I just taught myself from there with the internet. Very cool. Okay. That's it. We appreciate you guys. Let us know comments, questions, feedback. If you guys want to know anything specific about El Salvador and the inauguration, if you guys have any questions for us while we're here in Oslo, I know Dorsey's here, Matt Odell's here, Gigi's here. I'm really excited. Gladstein's obviously here. So if you guys have any comments or questions or anything you want from us here, and then I'll see Sailor and the rest of Europe in Prague, which I'm really, really excited about. So let us know. We appreciate you guys more than you know. This is the most fun media we get to do, just hanging out with each other and with you guys. And with that, we'll see you next week. Peace and love.
Get long, get paid.
Get long, get paid. That's right.